Hey guys, it's Maggie Mylow here, and I am back with the second part on our talk about paint. And so we're actually going to be doing a painting exercise in our book, and I'm just going to give you some additional advice. I had painted mine on this side, and so it kind of is leaning this way. I would recommend if you're doing it in your book, you do it on the flattest side. If you also have a lay flat book, so that's one with some coils, and it doesn't matter, it will always lay flat, and you can even flip it over. So these ones are kind of nice, the coil ones. So you can give whichever one, but just make sure you find the flattest side if you have a hardbound book. So we're going to talk about how we're going to approach doing a painting. So this is kind of what we talked about, where we talked about the basics of layering. So applying a base coat, doing highlights or shadows and adjustments, and then highlights in detail, as well as working from back to front. So this is what we're going to talk about right now. So whenever you approach a painting, if you were to even look at a reference picture, whenever you're looking at it, you have to look at what is the farthest away or what is in the background, and then approach it by moving forward through the painting. So that way you can layer appropriately. Now there's always rules to be broken. People approach painting completely different. So whatever you feel most comfortable with, this is how a lot of people do approach it, and this is how I'm going to teach approaching it. So in this example, we are going to just kind of look at this picture right here. So this is what we're going to paint on this side of the book. So I just did a really rough background here. So we have a sky with a sun or moon or stars. So you can opt to whichever you want it to be. And if you wanted a crescent moon, you can feel free to do that as well. So we would do, so then we have mountains, we have some kind of background trees, we have these midground trees, foreground trees they're called, some land, some rocks, a little river, and some grass. So when you look at something like this, you have to kind of think about how would you approach this in a painting. So you kind of look at it as how do we paint a landscape in the scope of the universe? So we would paint the sky, then the next, or like the sky would be like the universe, then the next thing would be the moon and the stars. And then we would have our mountain because it would be something in the farthest distance. And then the background trees would be the next thing in the farthest distance. And then you just keep going forward and forward. So how we are going to approach this is kind of a little bit different, because there is a couple little things that I want you to kind of understand the way we have to layer things on top of each other. So the steps for this is we are going to do the sky. We are going to do the sun, moon, or stars. We're going to do the mountains. We're going to do the water, because we need to do whatever is underneath to the top as well when we do our ground. So water would be the lowest, then up to the land. So we have water, then we'll do our land, then we'll do our background trees, and we will do midground trees, foreground trees, grass, and rocks for detail. So for the colors that I have out, I tried to just keep very basics. I just wanted to do some really basic color mixing for you guys. I have white, primary yellow. This is like a phthalo blue or like a royal blue. It's called Windsor blue is this actual color. But just look for something that is around this color range. It's kind of like a really royal blue, and then some black. So the brushes I also have is a paintbrush, a 1-inch wide paintbrush, number 4 round, and then this is a number 1 liner brush, I do believe. Okay, so then I did tape this into my book to protect my instructions on this side, and I'm just gonna pull the book down, and I just gotta make sure this part is in focus. So there we go. And then I took the same kind of protected paper. You could use newspaper, magazines, or whatever, and just protect this side. So if I need to just refer back to where we are, I'll just flip it back this way. So the first thing we're going to do is I want you to make sure you've soaked your brushes in the water for just a little while, a couple minutes. You want it to soak up to the ferrule for roughly, about a couple minutes. Just want to make sure the water gets all the way up to the ferrule. And that is so that way the water will disperse the paint. It will flow a lot better and it won't gum up your brush, and it's easier to take care of when you need to clean them. So just get it out of the water and just squeeze. Just pull it over here for a second. So we're just going to squeeze the extra water out. You want a damp brush, not a sopping wet brush. Okay, so again, this was already pre-gessoed or painted over top with a couple layers. So we are going to do our sky first. So we're going to do kind of a little, let's do a night sky. So we can do a little bit of, I didn't really want white. Let's do some of this royal blue and a little bit of black just to darken it up. And then my paintbrush is a little too wet. And again, you want kind of that creamy consistency. So that's kind of what we're looking for. And you notice, don't swirl, just swipe back and forth. That's how you want to mix your paint color. Okay. I'm going to add a little bit of this white in a little bit. So we're just going to start really dark up in here. Add this really pretty color. Ooh, that's looking really nice. We're going to carry that down to about halfway. Maybe darken this up just a little bit up at top here. So you can see with that gesso on top or that paint on top of it, I can kind of keep blending the color as long as they are wet. So I'm just going to keep moving that paint. Pick up a little bit more of this blue color in here. Okay, now when it comes to the sky, we can let that dry for a little bit. And we can do another coat over top of it. For learning purposes, we should do that. I should show you the proper way to do it. Okay, so we'll just give that a minute or two to dry, just to let the colors kind of set for a minute or two. Clean out your brush. And then while that is drying, we'll do the land, or we'll do the water. I'm a very impatient painter, so while I'm waiting for things to dry, I will move on and I will do something else. So our river is going to be down here. We're just going to do a rough block in. When it's dry, we can go over top of it with paint. So we're just going to add maybe a little bit more black and a little bit more white into our river. Let's just go a little bit bluer this way. Okay, and I'm just going to kind of roughly take my brush a different way and block it in this way, and then I can kind of get a gist on where I like the land, and you can see I can kind of get a very sketchy land going already, and you use that to your benefit. Okay, so then while that is drying, again, get your big wide brush out, let it dry, or get out the extra water, and then we go back and we do our sky as we did before. Get a little darker up at the top. And you can see how the difference of that paint went on the second way. My brush is getting a little bit dry, so if you're noticing it's not moving the paint, just get your paintbrush back into some paint or water and then to some paint, and then just go back over top of it again. I wanted to darken this sky up a little bit more to make it look more like a night sky. Okay, and you can see how the next time, how much it's already covered that paper the second time around. Okay, so again, let's move back to our water. Okay, get your brush clean. Get the extra water out. Use that same kind of sky color. Add a little bit more blue to it and a little bit more white. I added some white into it. Oh, that's too watery. Okay, and then I'm just going to kind of roughly go over this again. I'm just doing a lighter brush stroke, so less pressure, just really touching the bristles of that paintbrush onto the paper. Okay. Very light, and you notice which way the brush is moving. So when it came to doing the sky, we did it this way. When I held the brush for the river, I held it this way instead. So I know it's really sketched in there. We can add detail after. This just gives us a platform to work on. So we're gonna let that dry for a minute. Okay. So we can always move from one thing to another while we're waiting for things to dry. So if we were doing the land, we know the land is going to be green. And so if we mix some of the blue in with yellow or green that we already have on our brush, that will be completely okay because that's going to form the land anyway. So whenever I kind of look at the painting, and now I know I said we were going to do the mountains next, but if I'm waiting for this to dry, I can't do the moon and the stars. So I can jump to something else that I know needs to be blocked in. So let's do that. So let's move to, well, we'll still use the wide brush because we're just doing in a blocking phase. We're going to take some of that same kind of sky color because we really want it kind of that shifted dark color because it's nighttime. So we're going to add a little bit of black into it. I'm going to take some of this yellow, mix it in over here. It's a really dark green. And I want to go darker first because when we get into how we layer into the next class tomorrow, we'll talk about why you have to start dark first. So I'm going to just block in this color right over top. I'm not even going to care if I go over top of the blue because I want the land and the water to kind of meet on their own. When it gets to these parts here, I can kind of just take my brush, move it the opposite way. And I think I'm going to need a bit more blue out. Just a note when it comes to putting your paint out, put less out than you think you need to. You'll save a lot more money that way, and you can always put more out, can't put it back. So let's just get a little bit more of that blue. Okay. Put more of that yellow. There we go. Okay, and then again, block this in. Okay, so just roughly block that in. Okay, so that gives us a little bit of something to work with. Let's go back to our sky. I believe it's dry. You can just kind of feel it. If it's cool, it's okay. Like it's the top part of the paint is dry. The under layer of the paint is dry. So acrylic paint can dry in about 5 minutes, depending on where you live, but it's going to need 24 hours to cure. So if I was to put water on top of this, it'll lift the paint and it'll do weird things underneath. So just make sure if you have your painting here that you don't get water on it for at least 24 hours. So let's do a quick little tip on to do stars. Okay, so if you don't have a spare toothbrush kicking around, I know you probably can't see it, but I've got some. I'm actually going to put this water is dirty blue, so that's okay. I'd rather you see it. And so you can see I'm really making that paint quite thin. Okay, so it's quite thin paint. I'm taking the number 4 round brush, and it doesn't matter if you have another brush or a stick or something. You just want something to tap with. And let's just do a couple of little stars. Ta-da, boom, you got stars. It's my favorite thing to teach. Kids love it. Stars or snow, there you go. Okay, then let's do a quick little moon. If you can't draw a circle, you can always trace one out. I am not gonna be like over particular on it, so I'm just gonna get some white paint and just make a pretty decent little moon here. Okay, and he is gonna have to dry, so let him dry. And then we move back to our land. So you can see it's always a constant back and forth. If you paint with acrylic, it's pretty forgiving. So let's just get a little bit of a lighter green on here. So now that we put our base layer in, we can kind of go over top, keep some areas a little bit darker, a little bit lighter. A little bit more yellow into this forefront in here. And you can see I can just add a bit more yellow on right on top. I can just blend that out. And just add some nice little highlights. We're just adding variation. If you add variation to your paintings, you're going to give it a lot of depth and interest. So that's what we're going to get into and later on in the lessons. But just for right now, let's just add a little bit of different grains on the top of it. Okay. So this is a good practice lesson to just get the feel of the brush as well. That's pretty cool over there. Sometimes a brush does cool things and just let it happen. That's pretty cool right there. Okay, and whatever way you hold the brush, that's the way you will make land. So if you get like little small brush strokes, it'll look like short little land. And if you do wide, long brush strokes, it'll look like sloping land. Okay. So just ish, something like that. I think I need a little bit more light up in here. Okay, I'm cool with that. This one needs a little fixing over here. Okay, and sometimes you just gotta learn to walk away. So boom, drop the mic, walk away. All right, so let's go back to this moon. Let's get some more white paint and just fill him in a little bit more. Might need another coat just because the black paint underneath. Too much paint. Okay. Now we're gonna put in a little bit a mountain. So mountains are kind of, I'm gonna put them more centered. So let's do, we're gonna start with a really darker color. It's a little bit of white in here. Let's go a little bit of white. Okay, so I'm just gonna kind of do a rough little, just something cool like that. Boom. It comes down in here. And then just fill them in. Keeping the brush strokes the way the mountain would be shaped. So we'll get into why we do that in a little bit, but just kind of keep the brush strokes the same way as the mountain. Okay, so I kind of like to do a little bit of blending white on blending. It's going to give it a little bit of shape right away. So we're going to just take some white paint, mix it into here. Oops. Okay. I'm just going to add some little light on the side here. Just blend it in. It's going to look like a nice little highlight on that mountain. And while it's still wet, if you can get some of that paint off your brush, you can either leave it brush stroke like that if you like it, or you can kind of soften it out a little bit by just cleaning out your brush and just pulling that into that white paint, or wet paint while it is still wet. Okay, and just pull that down. And then you can come over on this side. Add a little bit more blue for the shadow side. And let's go to this side. Okay. And just like that. Boom, let's add a little bit more shadow down in here. Okay, and ta-da. Boom, there's a cool little mountain. Let's add a little highlight on this side, just a little one. So I'm just taking that same highlight color, and I'm just gonna add a little something on that side. And again, wiping my brush off a little bit, and while that paint is still wet, just softening it out. This is kind of like a little bit of a watercolor technique, and it's kind of cool. Okay, so now that we have that, I'm just gonna come in here and just fix some of my water up along my edges. So I'm gonna get a little bit of a lighter, I'm just gonna get a new color mix here. Get a little bit more dark blue in here. Okay, and let's just kind of add some nice little areas where we need to fix our water. So you can kind of just come in here. The water is going to be a little bit darker towards the back, so let's just add that little bit of that darker blue up in here. There's a little island in here, sure, why the heck not? Who wouldn't want a little island there? Okay, let's do some other little touch-ups. So I'm just getting rid of anywhere where I see that white area. Oh, I want this. Maybe a little bit more white into it. And this is a number 4 round brush that I use for the mountains, as well as now for the water. And you see, like, I'll just even pick up some of that light color, that lighter color that I just made. So like going from darkest to lightest, and I'm just gonna add some of it back in here because there will be reflections of light from the moon. And we'll get into why we need to add depth and layering into paintings, but this, as you can see, it's starting to look almost jungle-esque. And this is also gonna show us like some depth too. Okay, so I just lightened that color. Now I'm just going to come back up in here, add some more of this lighter color, kind of in some selected places. Maybe it looks like there's a big lake back in there that's lit up by that moon. Okay, and then by doing the water and then doing the land and the mountains, now we can kind of gain a little bit of perspective on how big we need to make those trees. So now we need to kind of maybe adapt our painting to where we had originally, we're expecting. Oh, this is quite a bit lighter. Nice. Okay, I'm just going to kind of wipe my brush off a little bit. I'm just going to kind of blend some of this out. I just got that a little too dark. There we go. Okay. Again, just kind of lightening some areas. Let's go back to just a little bit darker, a little bit bluer. Just to correct some of this over brightness. Bit more white. Picked up some more blue and a bit more white. You're going to notice as I'm doing the water, I'm getting a little bit wider out. That's to show perspective, which we will learn in another lesson. But just kind of make sure that you're kind of doing a very ish shape like this. Okay. Pick up a bit more white on here. You notice I'm doing a little bit faster strokes, so we'll get into, all the brush stroke movements and everything else later on, but you're just gonna notice I'm doing a really light pressure and just doing a quick little wash over top of everything. Okay, so now we have some, basic land, some nice little river happening. So now here's where we can do some background trees. So we're gonna get these guys really dark green is what we want. We want a really, you're gonna notice I don't usually buy, don't buy greens. I usually make greens. I find you can make way nicer greens than you can buy. It's way cheaper too. So this, I took this Windsor blue, I took some of this green mix and I just added a little bit of black to it. We want it on the bluer side, so anything that's farther away, we give it a bluer tone. So I'm just gonna do some quick little trees up in here. I don't even know if you'll be able to see them. Let's get it a little darker. If you can't see it, just get it a little blacker. And I'm just doing some quick little dots to just kind of make it look like there's some really tall background trees up in here. Okay. And then over maybe on this side, there's some, I'm just doing some quick little brush movements, little taps, and then just filling it all the way down to the bottom. It's really quick. Okay. What is in front is what is important. Don't worry about the trees so much, because as soon as we put something in the distance and we do the same thing closer and keep making it more and more detailed as we go to the front, these are automatically going to read as the same thing. So we're just going to make a bigger tree. I think I gotta get a little blacker. I'm just gonna go to some blue and black to start off with. Okay, we're gonna do some mid-ground trees right here. So we're just gonna start from the ground up. These are gonna be pine trees. So let's go up like that. I don't even worry about if I go over those or not. I just ignore them and just start doing the tree like you think it needs to be. So you start just a little bit above And just tap from side to side. So we did a trunk of our tree, and you just use that as a guide and just keep doing taps of the bristles all the way out. Just make sure you fill in towards the base of the tree because it will be the fullest there. Okay. Okay, there's one. Now let's give him a little brother over here. Okay, let's fix the bottom up. Okay, repeat the process. So just start just a little above that and then tap just back and forth and just kind of keep gradually going back and forth. Fattening that little Christmas tree. There we go. Okay. Now we're going to do the same thing over here, but we're going to just make him a little bit bigger. Actually, while we're doing that, we're just going to make a little rock right here. So we're just going to do a little shape like that. Maybe another one like this. Okay, I'll make little potatoes, flattened potatoes. Okay, then let's do another tree right here. Okay, because he's closer, he's farther down. And his trunk of his tree is a little bit fatter. Okay, I need a little bit more black paint. I might only do one big tree because I have a feeling he's going to fill up quite a bit of that page. Okay, and then again, we're going to go from the top. And just keep tapping out. Okay, almost done. This black does cover really well, and you're going to notice why I have the protective paper underneath there, because I'm just kind of going off the page and I don't have to worry about messing it up because the pine trees are going to be like way over here. So I'm just going to take them to about there, and then we'll just focus on this side. That's the nice part about doing a tree almost half off the page. You don't have to finish the whole thing. Okay. Let's just clean this little stump up here. Move those up too. So we're just going to make a little bit of a shadow color underneath these. So if the moon is this way, the shadow is going to be this way. And I probably should lift some of this off. And just doing a little fix right there. That looks better. So just to kind of make it look like there's shadow of the pond trees right over there. Okay, and then we're gonna come over here, and then the light's going this side, so I'll do it this way. Okay, and then of course the shadow on the rocks as well. We're just gonna put those in since we have that color. Okay, so something like that. Okay, now we are going to add a light color source onto these rocks. So we're just going to take a gray color or whatever color, and let's just add a little, it's a little too bright, and just blending in with some other color on top. Okay, let that dry. Okay, and let's add a little bit more light on top of that guy. All right, so let's just touch up this moon a little bit since he's dry. Okay. Add a little bit of grass. I think the video is pretty long already. We're gonna do another lesson on doing trees, and I'm just gonna do a pretty quick little overview of, like, now I'll just do one of these trees. Just a quick little overview of how to layer color on top of these dark trees, because they look pretty stark against everything else that's got at least color to it. So the first thing we're going to do is we are actually going to mix a grass color, and we're going to use that color for our trees as well. Okay, I'm going to say ish like that. It's a little too bright, so let's add a little bit of black to it just to tone it down just a little bit. Take your liner brush. Your liner brush should not be in the water. The only two brushes that should ever be in the water at all times is your wide brush and your number 4 round. Okay, so we're just going to add a quick little, it needs to be just a little bit lighter. Adding just a little bit of white to it. And it needs to be yellower. There we go. And again, you're going to notice I'm swiping the brush, not rolling the brush. Okay, so just adding some tall grass just in and around in a few areas. This is just like minor little details, but it does make, you know, a little bit of extra touches, and why not? Okay, so that's like some really basic painting. So now to do just a quick little note on how to take these trees from looking so flat. We're going to take that same color we did before, but we're not going to do the same thing. We're going to leave some of this black showing, and we're just going to add some of that green right on top. Just with small little taps and leaving, oh, it's still wet. It is still wet. Give it a second. Get a little bit maybe more yellow in there. There we go. Okay. Small little dabs. And it'll just look like little pine needles. Okay. Make sure you put the lightest color on the side that is closest to the moon. So this side is obviously closer to the moon. So I'm just, again, just doing the same process, leaving some of the black showing. So we want some of that shadow color. Again, this is part of the layering. Okay. Oh, heck, we want this far. We might as well just do the last one. Just adding a bit more light on that side. Okay. Now, just do the same thing. Okay, and still just doing kind of like this tapping motion. We are almost done. Bit more yellow. There's some wet paint. So we're just gonna let it happen, add a bit more yellow to our brush. Okay, feels like it's a little disconnected right here. So you just kind of take a stand back. So usually I paint for about 20 minutes and then I will just take a little bit of a break. And usually when you stand back, you notice little areas that need a little bit of attention. So this guy needs a little bit more light on this side. So we're just gonna lighten this side up, and then I don't really care what happens on that side because it needs to be a little bit darker anyway. Okay. Okay, so that is a little bit better. Now this side's looking a little dark here, so I'm just going to show you how you would do a touch-up. So it just needs to just be lightened up on this side. Okay, so let's just correct that part just like that. And then I just kind of make this a little bit lighter on this side and just touch it up just like that and just blend it out, and ta-da, looks a little bit better. Looks not as disjointed from the rest, and you can kind of even carry that color over here so it looks like it's not completely going out of their picture. Okay, so that is where we end up. This is at where the point where you could either decide to keep going forward, or you can even just sign your name and be done with it. But that is your basic general way of how we're going to approach paintings: is base color, applying our highlights, then details, and then again working from back to front. So if you have any questions, please feel free to call or feel free to ask. Leave comments below. Also, sorry this was a really long video, but this is your part 2, and this is your practice for today. So I hope you guys share what you've done, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.